Hello, hello. I haven't done a professional photo shoot in over a year now, yet I managed to pump out consistent content every single day on my Instagram accounts and basically everywhere. So, as I was prepping for this episode, I thought, what is one thing everyone struggles with? And the one thing is definitely content. And we tend to think that we need a fancy podcast studio or we need a professional photographer or stuff to get all of our content done. But in these last couple of years, I've discovered quite a few hacks to actually make sure that creating content doesn't have to be too expensive or too time consuming. So this episode is going to be all about how you get to make more content in a really cheap way without it taking up all of your time. Okay, let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to Fail to Win, a show where we love to make mistakes and learn from them so you can turn your passion into profits and live life on your own terms. I'm Amy van der Putten from FastForwardAmy, your host and coach, and I'll bring you a new episode with simple strategies every Tuesday. I think the biggest hurdle starts, to be honest, in our mindset. I think there's a couple of things there. I think often as business owners, we think we want to make more content. I was actually in a store this weekend and the owner of the store told me, oh yeah, I need to be making more content like you. I just never seem to be getting around to it. And I think if you actually want to do that, there's two really big shifts that you need to make in terms of mindset. And I think the first one, if you actually want to zero in or hone in on the marketing side of your brand, you want to build more of a personal brand or show yourself in your brand more, I think the first thing we need to do is that we need to accept the creator identity. Often we resist, and I used to be like this. I used to not want to put my face out there. I used to not want to make videos and put myself out there. And it was because, I thought it was way too ego driven. I didn't want to be that person who was like, look at me. But after a while, I discovered that that's just what I needed to do if I wanted to get more business in. And so a really valuable shift we get to make here is instead of continuing to think of something like, oh yeah, I could do that after hours or whatever, is to really shift into the creator identity and to accept that creating content might just be a part of your job. The moment I started creating content seriously and allowing myself to, make it a part of my job instead of something that people wouldn't take seriously and I wasn't taking seriously, a lot changed. So to this day, I see that a lot of people take publishing a book or having, an event for their store or creating flyers. They take that more seriously than social content, but social content can be the game changer your business needs. So I think the first mindset shift needs to be accepting the creator identity and not feeling weird about that. And then alongside with that, the second mindset shift is that you're going to choose to be seen. So choosing to be seen, I think it was Radha Devlukia, and I heard her say, if you choose to be seen, you can't choose how people see you or something along those lines. And that really resonated with me because for the longest time, I was making content, but I was also afraid to be seen. And I had to come to terms with the fact that when you go out there, yes, you will get criticized by some people. Not everyone is going to like what you're putting out there. And the more you get seen, the more criticism there might be out there. But just simply not trying to prevent that from happening, but accepting that that is going to happen actually already all shifts a lot. Because I can tell you about the coolest tripods to buy and the newest iPhone and the biggest hacks. But if you're just simply not recording the videos or not making the content, then often it's not a matter of, I don't know how. It's a deep-seated, hey, secretly, I just don't want to be seen, actually, or I'm not taking myself seriously enough to allow myself to create content. So have a look at that, at the mindset part of things. And once you're there and you've accepted the fact that, being a creator is a part of your identity as a small business owner, then it's time to involve your environment. So this is something I did on the first date with my boyfriend. Maybe not the first date, one of the first dates. So on our first date, I definitely told him about everything I'm up to, what I do in life and business. And then what's it called? I think somewhere in, so the first date, I told him about my business, everything I do. He already knew a little bit. He once had seen a presentation or I was actually one of the speakers, so he'd seen me at a talk. So he kind of already knew, I was a business lady. I feel like when you say business lady or like boss lady, it sounds like vagina. I don't know why, but it just sounds like that. So he already knew about that. And then somewhere along the lines in the beginning of a relationship, I basically invited him. I was like, content is really important for my business. Sometimes when we're at a nice spot, when we're walking, sitting down, whatever, would you mind taking my photo or a video at times? Because that actually would really help me and my business, because creating content is such a hassle. And when I already have footage, it's just going to make my life and business much easier. So I really explained to him why it was important. I asked him. Turns out he's actually pretty good at it. He loves supporting me. I think if you have a loving partner or a sister or a best friend or even your kids, I know a lot of people who shoot with their kids, and you explain to them why it's important, they are going to support you in that a lot more. I've also seen a lot of moms shoot with their kids. I think and I've done this with my friends as well before I was in a relationship, and I haven't seen a lot of people do that. And it's because I think we often just simply don't take the time to explain to our environment why it's important to us. And they think that publishing those photos or those videos is really easy. But if you actually sit down and you tell them like, hey, this is actually not easy for me to always put myself out there, to be so vulnerable, to create all of the content, to get it all done. Would you mind occasionally helping me with it? When you say it like that, I think a lot of people are going to be much more inclined to help you. And chances are they actually feel really insecure about doing it right. So take your time to also instruct them, show them, maybe put them in front of the camera as you take the shots. Then they'll also start to get a feel for what it feels like to be on the other end of the camera. And they'll start realizing that it's not that easy. And then I think the big one here is also that I am not rude to my boyfriend when he actually takes the photos and the videos. And I think this is a big one because I do often see a lot of girls ask for half an hour of shots before they actually end up walking into the restaurant, or they get mad or upset when the photo isn't good, but that's not on him or that's not on your friend. So I do think you need to learn to manage your ego a little bit if you're doing it, and definitely don't get upset with the person who's actually trying to help you, because then they're also going to start to not like to help you with this, because they're going to feel like they're doing something wrong every time when they're actually just trying to help you. So my big tip here is to involve your environment, like your boyfriend, your partner, your kids, your mom, your friends, but actually really explain to them why it's important, why it's difficult for you, what type of help you can use. That is going to help you out a bunch because, for example, for me, at home, I'll often walk around in sweats. That's not always the best content. But when we go out to a restaurant on a date night, that is often the moment when I've actually put some effort into my hair, my makeup, the way I'm dressed. And so I can walk into the restaurant just simply on the date night, or Jonathan can literally shoot a 10-second clip of me walking in or sitting at the table. It doesn't even take a minute because we are very efficient, and I do go for the non-picture perfect footage. And I'm often like, oh, I don't want to. And then he's like, no, babe, let's just do it. It's like 10 seconds. And I know like 10 seconds, it's enough. And I have the footage. So yeah, just do it. Just involve your environment and don't overthink it. Like, do I need shots when I'm working or when I'm out? Whatever. When you're feeling good or where you're in a nice spot, just take some photos. They might come in handy later. You might not even know yet what for, but you won't regret having the footage. The third big tip, first we had the accept the creator identity and choose to be seen. I think I'll make those two tips. Choose to be seen. Or no, one tip. One is accept the creator identity, and a part of that is choose to be seen. 2 is involve your environment like I did with my boyfriend from the get-go. I think if I want to add something to that, it's definitely that your environment, they don't know what they don't know. And they might be intimidated just like you are. Now, my third tip is to get the right equipment. So for me, what made a massive difference is the moment I got a second iPhone. I know that's not cheap, but it is something I use every single day. So the second iPhone films me as I'm doing other things. This allows me to actually film myself while I'm sometimes doing work on my phone or messaging clients or whatever. And I can just shoot a lot more content like that more quickly. Invest in a couple of tripods. I have a tripod on my desk. Behind my desk, I have this little 10 euro IKEA tripod on my desk downstairs in the kitchen. I basically have tripods all over the house, one in my gym, I think one in my meeting room downstairs. You don't need as many tripods as I do. I have a microphone on my desk, which is what I'm talking into right now, which is definitely not the microphone I recorded things with last week. That was recorded in my car on my AirPods. The sound is terrible, but it was a good episode. So yeah, I think just get the right equipment that's going to save you time. If you're always looking for a tripod and you don't have a mini tripod to take along with you, just go and get one. It's really going to help you. And my fourth tip is to time block. I know a lot of people say they want to make more content, but they never get around to making the content. And I get that. It is definitely not easy. It requires a lot of discipline, especially if you're recording videos. You know, now with a podcast, it's just my voice. But if you're creating video content, it's like, it's the hair, it's the face, it's the makeup, it's the voice, it's the, the background, everything. So there's more pressure in video content, I feel. And I think one of the things is that maybe I can just comfort you. Yes, it will get easier. So for example, right before I started recording this episode, I got some bad news in about something, as you do as an entrepreneur. Stuff happens. And that would have thrown me off a couple of years ago, but because I've been doing this for such a long time, it has gotten easier and easier to just get into the flow of creating. So if you are dreading it, if you feel a lot of resistance, don't sweat it. It is going to get easier. And I think the biggest tip I can give you here is to time block and to make these recurring. So for example, I love time blocking. I love having an ideal week. For me, I always do my coaching calls on Thursdays. I time block my calls. I also time block when I have meetings is Tuesday afternoons, for example. And for me, my Mondays are actually my podcast days. So I just know typically, not always, but often on a Monday, I'll record 2 podcasts and then I'll also write the copy for those podcasts. I know that takes me about 2 hours to do all of it. So I know either Monday morning or Monday afternoon, I'll record those podcasts. At the same time, on Wednesday afternoons now, this is new, I've installed a content creation block for the more difficult stuff, which means creating ads, creating social content, growth content, which is something I hadn't been doing enough of. So now I've given that a spot. But I could easily also do all of that on a Monday. I just don't always feel like creating content on a Monday. And despite the fact that you can get yourself to do certain things, I also know to lean into the natural creativity I feel on Wednesdays. So I have a 2-hour block on Mondays, 3-hour block on Wednesdays. I did it for a really long time with a lot less time. So if you're currently feeling like, but Amy, I run a shop or I have kids or whatever is going on in your life, you might not have 2 half days free. The first tip I would give you is to, I don't know how to say this actually, but revisit the way you look at time. I used to need a whole day for a podcast and all of the copy, And then I learned like, when I'm efficient, I can batch it and I can record a couple of podcasts and then write the copy. And I'm just going to give myself 2 hours and I need to get it done. And often we just give ourselves a little bit too much time or we have a lot of resistance and then we end up doing it at the very last minute. So you might not need 3 hours for social content or for ads. Sometimes I record videos in one go and I can create like 6 videos in 15 minutes. And that's not edited or polished or whatever, but I can make it. So sometimes in our brain, things take a lot longer than they actually take in real life. So be really mindful of that. How much time do you actually need? If currently you have 0 time blocks in your week for content and you can just add in 1 to 2 hours, be that Monday morning between 9 and 11, first thing you do in your week, or Wednesday morning between 9 and 11, or an afternoon between 2 and 4. Like just, if you can just put a 1 to 2 hour block somewhere fixed in your week for content, that is already going to change a lot. And then another thing I did is I just created some buffer time into my day. So I have multiple short blocks, half-hour blocks for messages and stories. So that means at 11:30 and at the end of my day, I've just installed a quick block that I do on my treadmill. This is actually new in my weekly planning. And it means that I go on my treadmill and I just check my messages, Slack, all of that stuff. And when I have time left, and I feel creative, I can create some extra stories. So if you're not the batching type of person, you want to create in the moment, but you feel like you've been really postponing creating stories and extra content when the mood strikes, or you end up doing that whilst you should be actually doing other work, that happened to me a lot, it might help you to just include some buffer time into your days. Just a half hour or an hour block somewhere in your day where you catch up with some messages might actually also be the perfect time to create some content about maybe the questions and the messages you've gotten from clients. Which brings me to, well, actually what I wanted to add to that is last year, I wasn't this disciplined. I didn't have all of the fixed time blocks for everything, and I really kickstarted my creativity actually by always starting my day with content. So between 9 and 10, I was creating as much content as possible to really get myself back into that creative flow of reaccepting that creator identity. So if you've also fallen off of the wagon, or you feel like you've been dreading content more than you used to, it might be a good hack to just do content the first half hour of the day or first hour. And now you might be thinking, but Amy, for me, it takes much longer. Well, filming is usually not the thing that takes so long. It's usually editing. No one said you need to edit at that time. I think I do my edits, either I outsource them or I do those when I have real buffer time or whatever, but the filming is the hardest part, so I like to get that done. The editing and subtitling and stuff is not necessarily the hardest part, it's the most time-consuming part, if we're being honest. And so my fifth tip is actually to use AI. Subtitling used to be so much work. Writing transcripts used to be something I used to have to actually pay someone per hour for. And right now, it's gotten so much easier. You can record a video or a podcast. Last week, for example, I went live about my program. I then took the recording from that live, turned it into a transcribe with TurboScribe, which is an app I use for that, or a website. And then in ChatGPT, I asked ChatGPT to write me a bunch of pieces of content based on my transcript about my product. So it just basically wrote my sales content. So if you're not yet using AI to repurpose your content into multiple pieces of content, you are severely missing out. For me, for example, for my podcast, it's just changed everything. I can create really great blog posts now. I can create all sorts of content, quotes, carousels, emails, all from one simple podcast episode. So for example, this podcast episode, I'll turn that into a transcript with TurboScribe, and then I'll go to ChatGPT, upload my ChatGPT podcast prompt. I'll say like, hey, can you turn this podcast into multiple deliverables, being my description, my Instagram posts, my blog posts, all of that. And then I'll tweak it for about 20 minutes-ish. So after 20 minutes-ish of tweaking and stuff, I will have 11 pieces of content. If you're not using AI yet to help you out with repurposing and editing your content, you should. And if you don't know where to get started, don't sweat it. I created a tutorial about my exact process, even including an example prompt that you can use for ChatGPT. So if you want access to it, all you need to do is just simply go to the link in the description. You'll see a link there where you can access both the prompt and the tutorial. It's fastforwardamy.com/content buddy, or go to Instagram to fastforwardamy and just DM me the word buddy, and then I'll send you the link to the tutorial and the prompt, and it's gonna change your life. It's gonna help you to become so much more consistent. Which actually brings me to maybe a sixth tip is I think we often just need accountability. I have a lot of clients who are like, oh, Amy, I want to do a weekly newsletter like you, but I struggle to be consistent with it. How do you do this? And to be fair, my biggest content hack was that a couple of years ago, back in 2020, I just felt myself postponing. I had a lot of resistance to the podcast and I wanted to create the podcast, but I kept on postponing until I thought, enough is enough. Stop fearing the failure, just do the thing. And what I did is I publicly proclaimed to my audience like, hey guys, I am going to be publishing a new podcast episode every single Tuesday at 7 a.m. And since I did that and I publicly declared that and was held accountable by that declaration, and people asking me like, oh, when is a new podcast coming out? Stuff like that. And me saying every week, see you next week, Tuesday. It has really helped me to stay consistent both in publishing the podcast as well as in publishing the newsletter, the blog post. So I think just creating a set rhythm for yourself is my last and my sixth tip that is really going to help you become more consistent, is that you don't have to think about when shall I publish it, or should I do it, or what am I going to make. For me, I just have a couple of same pieces of content that go out every week. And these are not necessarily my viral pieces of content. They aren't helping my account grow, but they are helping it to, stay alive, maintain, nurture my audience, and they really pay off. So I know my podcast episode becomes a blog post, becomes an email, becomes a quote post, becomes 2 reels, etc., etc. But if I would have to think about, okay, the blog post, should I do that this week, or which format should it have? Then every week I'm making those same decisions, and that is really tiring on your brain. So my tip here is to set a rhythm that keeps you accountable, and that's actually also going to make life much more easy for you. Okay, so these were the tips. 1 is accept a creator identity and remember that you are choosing to be seen. You can't choose how people see you. 2, involve your environment so they know why you want to be making the content and how they can support you in that. 3, get the right equipment, which also means, by the way, film yourself behind the scenes as you are working. Use the equipment to film you as you're working. There's this really great quote by Gary Vee. It says, document, don't create. So just document what you're already doing. Are you packing boxes? Film yourself. Are you on a coaching call? Film yourself. Take a photo, stuff like that. 4 was time block. For me, it means Mondays and Wednesdays are content time, not full days, but partial times. Include some buffer time so that you get to be creative when you feel like it. 5 is use AI, and definitely go and check out my Content Buddy tutorial. It's going to teach you how you can use ChatGPT to turn one piece of content into multiple pieces of content. And last but not least, set a rhythm that keeps you accountable so that the decision-making process gets taken away from you. Okay, good luck. Make sure you don't forget to download the tutorial and the prompt, and talk to you next week, Tuesday.